Welcome to the all-new Murder Analysed with me, Christina Moore. Now let me just highlight, because I'm really excited now, that my podcast, Let's Have a Chat About Murder, is now on YouTube as well. So you can go onto my site and you can either look at videos or you can look at podcasts. And the podcasts are good because you can have them on the ground, you can, put your earphones in and off you go. And there are some different ones on there as well, and there will be continue adding different stuff on there. So anyway, don't forget Murder Analysed and Let's Have a Chat About Murder podcast are here now on YouTube. So thank you, and let's get on with this. So join me as we delve deep into the darkest corners of human nature. From the infamous serial killers to unsolved mysteries, we analyse the cases that have baffled investigators and terrified communities. In each episode, we'll uncover the psychological profiles, dissect the evidence, and explore the chilling details that makes these stories unforgettable. If you love true crime and you want to stay updated with our latest analysis, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. So grab yourself a coffee and let's uncover the truth together. So welcome back, my partners in crime. Welcome back. So this psychological analysis of Robert Clive Napper is important. Right? It's important to understand about him, why he did the things he did, or why psychologists believe he did the things he did. We look at his early life background, his early environment, legal proceedings, the committal to Broadmoor Hospital, his diagnosis as schizophrenic and other mental health illnesses this man has got, and also why and how he got them. What maybe, because with schizophrenia, it's very difficult to diagnose why, right? People have it. There's no real reason why. There can be multiple reasons, multiple different things that go on to create someone to have this. But when we look at Napper's background, there are some significant signs of maybe what created it, what made him internalise himself, what made him feel rejected from society and gave him these really dark thoughts that he had. Now, we've already done Robert Napper's case when we've looked at the murder of Rachel Nickell. So the facts of them cases are in them two videos that are on there. And if you have a look at them videos, just be warned that they are graphic. It tells you in detail about what he did and why, to not only her but to other victims of his horrendous crimes. So I need you to have a warning about that. But this video is more about the analysis, right? We're looking at really why people kill, right? Why the possibility, no one really knows, right? Let's be honest. We're talking about now psychology of the human brain, which we seem to know a lot, but we don't know everything, right? So these are only what psychologists have wrote about him. I mean, you've got to think, when you catch someone like him, Napper, he is of interest, really, not because of the way he killed and what he did, but why, right? From a psychological point of view, from a profiler's point of view, it gives you an understanding of, one, how then to catch the next person that's going to be like him, because you're looking at certain traits, and also his MO. So it opens up the doors then especially for profilers, to understand what they're looking at, but also for psychologists and all this sort of stuff, and psychiatrists, to thinking why these sort of behaviours came out in someone like that. Why are we not all like that, right? Because a lot of us have had issues like what Napper have got. A lot of people suffer from mental health like Napper does, but what changes him from us, right? And we're looking in, or delving in, I suppose, to that sort of theories of what could have created this sort of monster. And to tell you the truth, this is a highly dangerous man, right? It's highly dangerous. Even in the hospital conditions, he is feared, not only by the other inmates, but by the staff. He is unpredictable, this man, unpredictable. Even though he's medicated and is managed, there's a lot of staff having to manage this man, he is still a deadly person, even though he is now incarcerated. So don't forget, this man was out on the streets for a very, very long time. And so this is what this video is all about. And I hope you enjoyed this video and this new take on Murder Analysed, because really we're called Murder Analysed because we deal in murders and stuff, but we also must deal in the analysis of and the criminal profiling of such cases like this. So if you're ready, let's go. So Robert Clive Napper was born on February 25th, 1966, and he is a notorious British serial killer and rapist. His criminal activities, which included the murder of Rachel Nickell on Wimbledon Common in 1992 and several other brutal crimes that we've already discussed in the other videos. This led actually to significant public and academic interest in understanding his psychological profile. This analysis aims to delve into the psychological factors that contribute to Napper's, I think, defiant and abhorrent behaviour, his mental health diagnosis, and the implications for forensic psychologists and criminal profiling. Napper's early life was marked by trauma and instability, which played a critical role in shaping his psychological development and subsequent criminal behaviour. Napper grew up in a dysfunctional family with a violent and abusive father. His parents, it was just a terrible relationship, really, and this child from a very early age really was characterised, I think, by the domestic violence, and this significantly impacted his psychological well-being from probably the day he was born. At the age of 12, Napper was sexually abused by a family friend, an event that really had a profound and lasting effect on his mental health. And this is where they believe that trauma created this the schizophrenia side of it to come out. After that, following this abuse, Napper became increasingly withdrawn from society. He isolated himself and struggled from, I suppose, a meaningful relationship, and often exhibited bizarre and antisocial behaviour, and this sort of also then alienated him again from his peers. So from this one incident of where he was abused at the age of 12, literally transformed this boy's life from a very early age. But there were clear signs after that. But when these signs were left, no one intervened. There was no help for this lad. This is why they believe that the Napper then, because he isolated himself, he became indrawn into himself, he withdrew from society as a whole, really, and that's when, even at that age, he became quite a dangerous person. And when we look at his educational struggles, I think, stemming from this incident and from the background of domestic violence within the home, Napper really had difficulties in both school, academically and socially. He didn't fit in. He was picked on and bullied because of his way, and he was sort of in his own world. He couldn't fit in, and also because I think of all the faults and stuff that were going through his mind even at a young age, and it's been proven now that many children do suffer from schizophrenia. People used to think it was more of something that happened around 15, 16, 17 for some reason, early sort of teens to late teens. It's now been highlighted that it can come very young, and not everyone that's been diagnosed with schizophrenia young has been abused or whatever. So that's what I'm saying. Schizophrenia is not an easy one to diagnose, but in Napper's case, it is the one that really overwhelmed his brain. It overwhelmed him, the faults, the dark faults and stuff that was going on in his brain because of this first incident at 12. Then you're expecting these kids to go to school when they're coming out of an environment of domestic violence and abuse and everything else. We're expecting these kids to go to school and fit in and be academically sound and fit in socially. It just doesn't work. So this made it more difficult for him because he stood out then, right? He stood out even more than he did before. And I think That's then where this real isolation started to come. He didn't fit in, he wasn't supported in education, he wasn't supported at home, he wasn't supported in his community, so he then isolated himself, and that's where he felt safe. But as that manifested, this internal anger, hatred, distorted view of the world then became his reality. And really the end result of his early childhood is what he ended up becoming. And a terrible, one of the most ruthless killers, really a demented man, deadly, dangerous man that I think the UK has ever seen. So let's talk about his mental health diagnosis and really the incarceration of him. So following his arrest, Napper was subjected to extensive psychological evaluations that led to a critical diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, a severe mental health disorder characterised by delusions, hallucinations, and that really impaired his reality. Testing found that he has significantly influenced his criminal behaviour because of this, right? So as I said, this stems right back, I think, to his upbringing in his family home, his issues at school and the bullying and everything that he felt there. But really what it really stems back to is that incident when he was 12 years old. This really then changed his whole mental outlook, I think, how he dealt with the world, how he dealt with himself. Because when you are diagnosed with schizophrenia, you then have to look at what then part of that illness or disease is affecting you like. And it is noted that he has hallucinations, both auditory and visual. So he's not only hearing dark voices and stuff, he's actually visualizing them as well. Anyone that suffers from schizophrenia has a terrible time, right? One, when their first diagnosis coming to terms with it because they don't understand what's going on, why they're hearing and seeing these things, right? Because they are so real to them, it's their reality. Then they do start to withdraw from life, because if they don't withdraw, everything in the outside world seems to be 10 times worse than what it would seem. They're so paranoid, so they think everyone's looking at them, an eye movement or anything, but people are not really probably even looking at them, but they feel this, they feel they're going to be hurt, they can feel something like that stops them going out. Schizophrenia, the diagnosis of schizophrenia is very difficult for people to cope with, let alone if you have a diagnosis like what Napper's had, where you can tell that would have literally transformed his whole life, right? This changed this person's life totally. It changed his personality. It changed every view that this man had ever held, even from a young child. This man is totally changed, and he is run by and driven by these voices or hallucinations that he is constantly seeing. It is terrible for these people that suffer with this sort of disease. Medication, yes, does help. There's also issues with medication, whether they continue to take them if they're actually diagnosed. Usually you'd have to have then an injection and stuff like that to keep them, but not all these medications work. They also have side effects. So anyone, and I feel for anyone that is suffering from this schizophrenia, I really feel for them. But when we look at someone like Napper who has a diagnosis of schizophrenia, there are other areas of his life that also made him become this sort of a killer. Schizophrenic people are more probably scared of you than you are of them. That's why they isolate and go inward in their self. Napper is not your typical schizophrenic, right? He's a rarity, and we must put that out there, because it's unfair to say that schizophrenia or paranoid schizophrenia is what made him become this killer. It is a part of the bigger picture of this man's mental health, because he had lots of mental health, but he also had an upbringing that distorted his view of the world from a very young age. So please don't think that when I'm talking about mental health illnesses and schizophrenia, people with schizophrenia, that I'm aiming them just at you. People with schizophrenia, as I say, and I'll continue to say it, are probably more frightened of you and would run from a situation rather than do what Napper did and sought out and hurt and murdered people, really, because I think in his brain that's what he was told to do. But he was left for many years from a very young child to suffer this sort of thing going on in his brain. By the time he was now diagnosed, he was then arrested and incarcerated. Really, even the medication cannot help this man. He's too far gone. So now that's all over with, and we can now get on with this case. So listen, let's have a look at this impact of this criminal behaviour because of all this. So the delusions and hallucinations associated with schizophrenia did play, in Napper's part, a significant role in his crimes. For instance, his belief in being persecuted, because that's what he believed, that everybody around him was persecuting him, might have fueled, they think, this is all theories, by the way, might have fueled his violent outburst in this need to dominate his victims. Now that domination probably goes right back to where he was dominated as a 12-year-old child by the abuser. So then this is where we're bringing in now the links to it. His condition led to a length of empathy and a profound disconnection from the consequences for his actions, allowing him to commit these horrendous crimes without any remorse. Believe it, this man has got no remorse because he's got no empathy. Now, we talked about empathy and the other psychological things, and we'll go into empathy in a little bit longer, but if you haven't got any empathy for anybody, you can't empathise with someone. So if someone's screaming at you to stop, to do this, you are not hearing it. If you're hearing it, it's not going to react like if we had a child screaming at us and you're like, oh God, have you hurt yourself? Napper wouldn't have seen that. Napper would not have been able to recognise or have any empathetic feeling for anybody because he'd lost that at the age of 12, or probably even before that, in this home that he was brought up in. But at the age of 12, that was it. Bang, that was gone. Right? He wanted that dominance. There was no empathy left in him. It was gone. It was gone. And this is when you're dealing with someone who's psychopathic. Right? This is a psychopathic tendency, and there's no stopping someone like Napper. So we have to think of all the crimes that he's done. And when we look at the legal proceedings and everything, and the committal to Broadmoor Hospital, which is a mental institution, really, it's for the criminally insane. Given the severity, I think, of his mental health conditions, Napper was deemed unfit to stand trial in the traditional sense, right? So because he had to be taken to trial, you have to understand what you was doing was wrong. Right? You have to have the capacity to understand what you was doing was wrong. In Napper's case, he didn't understand what he was doing was wrong. He just didn't. And then that's why, in that legal sense, it was diminished responsibility. But you cannot allow then this man out in the public, right? He will probably be locked up until the day he dies, because he's insane, really. So he wasn't then put through the legal justice system process, and he was committed to Broadmoor Hospital, one of the most secure psychiatric hospitals designed actually for individuals with severe mental disorder who pose a significant risk to others. Now, Broadmoor Hospital is known as housing some of the country's most dangerous offenders with serious mental health issues. It provides a highly controlled environment where patients receive intensive psychological and psychiatric treatment and supervision. And he needs that. Napper's committal to Broadmoor ensures that he receives the necessary mental health care whilst also protecting the public from potential of further violence from this man. If this man ever got out, there is no way that this man would not commit the same crimes or worse crimes than he has already committed. Undoubtedly, he will never be allowed out. So at Broadmoor, Napper undergoes continuous psychiatric treatment, including medications to manage his schizophrenia, therapeutic interventions aimed at addressing his violent tendencies and cognitive disorders. Now, we spoke about them in other analysis, but I have said, and it is true, that a lot of people that have worked at Broadmoor Hospital, even though they're not allowed to speak about the cases because it's confidential, it has been noted that, yes, a lot of staff are fearful of Robert Napper, and you have to be very, very careful when dealing with this man, even in this secure setting. He is very, very quick to react, and there's a lot that will go on in Napper's mind, even though he's on the medication. So the hospital's multidisciplinary team of psychiatrists, psychologists and other mental health professionals work together to monitor his condition and adjust his treatment plan as needed. So Napper's case has significant implications in the field of forensic psychology, highlighting the critical importance of early intervention, comprehensive assessment and tailored treatment for individuals with severe mental health disorders. Napper's trajectory underscores the need for early detection and intervention of the cases of severe mental health. Identifying the treatment conditions like schizophrenia in the early stages can prevent the escalations of the symptoms and reduce the risk of violent behaviour. And this is where it comes back to where he was left as a child to manifest over the years without really anyone taking any notice and giving this boy some support. If you don't help people with mental health or any other disorders or traumas that they've had in young life, it can come out in later years and can be quite disastrous. So comprehensive assessments help in the devising effective treatments and management plans that address both mental health and the criminal genetics of these offenders. So you're looking at this is what I'm saying, if you can, when you catch someone like Napper for the crimes he's done, which are horrendous, right? And we always have to think of the victims in these sort of crimes. But what we are trying to do when you are looking at the psychology is, where will that take us in the future? What should we be looking at? What early interventions should we bring in for kids or people of abuse or whatever, people suffering from mental health? What is needed to stop or reduce what could then lead on to some very serious criminal offences that some of these people do if they are not intervened young, where we don't pick them up early, we don't help them, they're just left in society. I think it's the whole thing about all these things when we do these interventions and we look and we deep delve into their psychological profiles. Most of these kids at a young age have been missed. The signs were there but no one picked up on them, and it shows the importance and highlights actually the importance of early intervention, early help in schools, supporting these kids, making sure that their early years are supportive, that they're not put through traumas, that they're not left to deal with things like this on their own. So these preventions and intervention strategies, we have to look, when we look at Nappers, and we said about we need these early interventions, which we do. They must be robust though. They must have intervening strategies. You must have strategies across multi-agencies like schools, police, social services, mental health, all these sort of things have to come together. Multi-agencies working together, which they do try and do, right? But we have funding cuts and everything else. But I think look at the results if we don't do that, right? This is the results of when we have kids that are in need of, and don't forget this boy was very young when this first started. So I think he was about 27 or whatever when he was really a killer, but he was a rapist before that, right? So, he was a Green Lane rapist. So I think they reckon it's about more than 90 people that he had assaulted in that time. So you've got to think, if there's any interventions, a lot of these incidents would have been solved. So this is a highly significant point of this case, is when we're looking at his crimes and why he's done these sort of crimes, but also it's about the failings, right? We must highlight the failings. And if we don't change them, and they haven't changed that much, to tell the truth, they say they're trying to get involved and we're trying to do it, but we have the biggest kids poverty actually in the UK in the last couple of years. It's just gone up multiple. Poverty creates other issues in the household, right? Kids that are starving. You've got kids now, 12-year-old, going to do drug dealing and stuff, for all this sort of stuff. So we have a lot of issues going on in our society with our children, and a lot of these children may not come out with any mental health issues at all, but many of them will. So we have had lockdowns and everything in this country and across the world, where we have self-isolated, we've made our children self-isolate, and that is a big issue, right? And that is what we're now seeing now, is this social isolation causes issues. We've had people wearing face masks where kids can't learn sort of behaviours, because communication is not just about the way we speak, it is what we do, how we communicate is in our facial expressions, in our art. All this has hindered a child's development. It really has hindered it. So then you add on, when you have other kids that are coming from domestic abuse backgrounds, violent backgrounds, abusive backgrounds, what are we developing? So as we've had this over the last few years, we've had to now come up with much more coping mechanisms for these children, and we have to really understand why kids are doing what they're doing, and these early interventions to make sure that they do not go any worse than what they are, because we need to be supportive, because these children are our next generation. They're the next generation, and we have to make sure that they are mentally capable of going and enjoying their life and having a successful life. That's what we want, isn't it? As parents, as people, that's why you listen to these shows, because you want to understand, you want to keep your kids safe, you want to keep yourself safe, but also keeping yourself safe is about your mental health. It's about making sure you keep your children and yourself mentally, physically sustainable, so you can live a happy and fulfilled life. And unfortunately, in Napper's case, we can see that this never came out. So what people have also looked through in Napper's case is about the risk assessment and management of such young children who go through these traumas. That can be helped, and that prevents and can be pushed out, not only in England but across the world. Different mechanisms, different theories that may help to make sure that someone like Napper isn't left again. Do you see what I mean? So these cases where we talk about not just the crime, but we talk about the behind the scenes bit, the why, the how, the psychological, is really important to understand, because we all have children and we all want them to grow up the best way and enjoy their life. But we also don't want any Nappers coming up the ranks. We really don't. So Robert Napper was diagnosed with this paranoid schizophrenic, and he was subsequently committed to Broadmoor Hospital, and this highlights the complicated or complex relationship between the severe mental health disorder and violent criminal behaviour. This case actually emphasises the importance of early interventions, comprehensive psychological assessments, the integrated treatment strategies in managing the individual, and the significant mental health issues really coming from that. So in learning from these cases, like Napper's, forensic psychologists and criminal justice professionals can develop more effective approaches in preventing and also limiting the impact of severe mental illness on both individuals and on the society. It's really important that we understand that's what these cases are about, and also to highlight, if you're a school teacher, if you're a mental health professional, if you're a doctor, all these sort of things, to look out for these sort of signs. And I think, if we all did that, if we all started looking at our communities and looking at the children and, taking an interest in someone's mental health, not just saying, oh God, they're a bit strange, this, that and the other, and people do that all the time. What else is going on in that person's mind? Is there any interactions that people can do and that authorities can do to help and assist? Because if they don't, if they continue to keep, saying to people with mental health, just take your medication, go away, we're seeing another 6 months for a doctor's appointment, or when we've had in some cases that someone with schizophrenia literally tried to get himself, and we've done the case on him, tried to get himself, sectioned because he knew he was going to kill one, then ended up killing his baby, right? Because there was no one took him seriously, no one helped him. These are issues that we can prevent. Could we have prevented Napper? I'm not sure, right? Because when you have a family environment like Napper's, where he came from such a violent background anyway, and it was so dysfunctional, his family, would they have took him? Would they have made sure that he was mentally okay? See a doctor, see this. He was abused at 12. The clear signs were there that this boy's personality had changed at 12. Clear signs. But still no one intervened. What do you expect if we don't intervene? As parents, as communities, as health workers, as school teachers, as all this, we have a duty of care over these children. So if they're not getting the help and support from home, we have to give it. And that's really what should come out of this case, is that these interventions are there for a reason, and we need to implement them, and we need to have strategies that we can help these kids before it is too late. And many, many more people will lose their lives if we don't. So let's have a look. Let's round this up, right? This psychological profile of Napper. So yes, he had schizophrenia, and we've gone over that, about how that affected him and really what that was. He was obsessional and paraplegic disorder. Napper exhibited extreme tendencies, particularly in relation to his crime. He meticulously planned his crimes as well and executed his attacks, often collecting surveillance of his victims, and also took souvenirs from his victims. So he was like a stalker as well. I think one of his victims he did watch for a good few times, and he was a, what they call peeping Tom and stuff like that. So I think a lot of people that he did stalk, luckily for them, he didn't go on to do it, but a certain amount of his victims, yeah, he did, and he did take souvenirs of that. So typical of a lot of the serial killers that we have out there, to remember that experience by these souvenirs. He also showed signs of paraphilic disorder. This includes sexual sadism, which involved deriving pleasure from inflicting pain and suffering on others, which he, when you actually read about and look in his attacks, he was brutal in his attacks, and sexually violence reflected in his deviant interests. So he was one dangerous man. I think when we look at his cognitive disorders and his fantasies, because it was a fantasy world that he'd made up, and we've spoke about this with Dharma and everyone before when we spoke about these sort of tendencies with them. Napper's cognitive distortion included a deeply entrenched belief of his own superiority and justification for his violent actions. He often fantasized about dominating and controlling his victims, which he acted out through his crimes. So where he would stalk or peeping Tom, however you want to put it, he would already have in his mind what he's going to do to these victims, because he's watched them, he's understood their sort of habits, and in his mind his fantasy was already being created, and he meticulously really had it out in his mind what he was going to do. So his MO, Napper's criminal behaviour, was marked by extreme violence, meticulous planning, and a clear escalation in the severity of his crimes, because don't forget he started off assaulting women out in public in broad daylight with young children, and then went on actually to murder. So there was an escalation there for him. So I think his early crimes activities began to be less severe, and that's sort of where this sort of stuff come from. There was voyeurism and there's petty theft. These early behaviours, I suppose, indicate the underlying deviant interests and lack of regard for the social norms. And this is where when we talk about social norms, it's a lot to do with where they isolate and withdraw from society. These social norms are just they just don't get it. They're accepted, and so they just don't have that. People around them and society would say, hang on, no, that's not right, that opinion is not right, that's not right. He didn't have that. So the murder of Rachel Nickell in 1992, I suppose it was one of his most notorious crimes, that murder of Rachel on Wimbledon Common. And this attack, I'm telling you, was brutal, right? It involved multiple stab wounds, sexual assault in front of her young son. And he didn't touch the boy. It's like he saw that boy as him as a young child. Do you see what I mean? In his mind, because he could have easily have killed that child as well, and he didn't. I suppose when we look at his, arrest in 1994 after being linked to Samantha Bissett's murder as well, and her daughter Jasmine, again, a horrible and horrific crime. His arrest was a subsequent confession of multiple crimes that underscored his deeply ingrained violent tendencies and mental health issues. That's after that he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and again unfit to stand trial, and we've gone through that. I think the implications, when we look at, as I said with Napper, and you round him up, he is just one dangerous man, really. He really is. He's so dangerous even to this day. And I think if you watch them other videos that I've got up about him, you can understand just how violent this man is. But from a psychological point of view, he will always be dangerous, and that really stems from his early life, the early traumas, social isolation, and also the abuse that happened at 12-year-old. This is where this man was created. A lot of people said he was born evil, or a lot of people say you can be born evil or you're made mad, this sort of thing. He was made mad. I think that's the basics of it. We're talking about someone that's so deranged, and the influences he had as a young child was left to create a monster. And really, that is the case of Clive Napper from a psychological point of view. So, thank you for watching. So you're pleased that we're back, and it's a little change, right? There are some changes going on, but we're still going to come out with some other crimes and stuff. But this is the new Murder Analysed, because as I said, murder is one thing, but analysation of it is another. And I know many of you are interested in the backside of their stories. You want to know maybe what made them do it. Listen, psychiatry, psychology, criminology, criminal profiling is not easy, right? Because there's so many factors that go into creating someone that does this sort of criminal behaviour. But the more we analyse it, and the more we analyse them as a whole, and then we can start to see patterns that emerge, and that sometimes helps either find the next serial killer you're looking for, or multiple killer you're looking for. But more importantly, it helps to combat them before they actually get going, right? It stops them going over that line. That's really what I think criminal psychology should be about. So right after the fact, when we're looking for a serial killer, I'm more interested in before that, getting them before they go to do that. So let me know your views on this. I hope you found this interesting. I love it, criminal psychology. I think it's really good, and we need to look at it more. And I've enjoyed doing these sort of cases. We'll still do some other ones. So you know what to do. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, because I always forget to say that, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you keep watching. See you soon. Bye for now.